Today's video is just going to be a sort of overview of a couple of knives I just got in yesterday. I got this one. It's called a Heavy Belt Knife by a guy named Matt Peters, Waterstone Blades, up in British Columbia, Canada. And the other one is this new Buck Knives Selkirk Survival Knife, as they call it. And just doing, you can see some test cutting. It's just like a short qualitative look at both of these knives. Nothing in depth yet, but I figured I'd just make a video about them because from what I've done today, I'm actually really enjoying these knives. Just start off with this one, the Waterstone Blades Heavy Belt Knife. Just get the specs out of the way. It's about a 4.5, 5-inch blade, about 0.19 inches thick, saber flat grind, 80 CR V2 steel, which is sort of a modified 1084. With, mostly from what I can tell, a lot of stuff in there for either grain refinement or greater hardenability. It's got about 16 thou behind the edge, although it thickens up quite rapidly. But it is, compared to a lot of knives today, fairly thin behind the edge. It's about half as thick as this knife. This knife's about 30 thou behind the edge. And handle, full tank construction, not skeletonized or tapered. It doesn't bother me at all. I actually kind of like the heavy feel of a knife in a hand, but that's purely personal preference. It's got black and green G10 liners with black micarta, or maybe very dark green micarta over the top, and 2 pins. And it was sharpened freehand, about 15 to 20 DPS. I think, looking at it, I tried to match the angle on my stone, and it felt sort of about 17 to 18 degrees. Not bad, considering the type of knife this is. And it was sharpened on a silicon carbide, came, slicing phone book paper easily, stuff like that. And I have to say, I really enjoy this knife. I really like the sheep's foot profile as a general utility profile, because I don't think, at least for me, for the type of cutting that I often do, I don't really need a great deal of belly because I'm not doing a bunch of draws and slices like that. They're great for hunting knives, but I like this type of thing for general, around the everyday cutting, because it gives me good access to the tip. I can still do slices, things like that. Works well. Through the cutting, I'm not positive how many cuts I did. I did a few hundred, including some ramming, twisting cuts into knots. As I would expect, 0 edge damage, still shaving hair, basically ignored the wood as it was supposed to. It's got this forge finish, he left it on there, which I actually find quite attractive. It looks kind of nice, I like it. But yeah, it worked pretty nicely. It pried well. I found, because I was cutting pine, because of the way the main grind of the blade, it's relatively thin up front, and so I'm able to get really deep, but it thickens up rapidly. So I get a lot of, in really heavy cutting, I get a lot of wedging and ripping of the wood. Like it splits the grain apart. Yeah, is what I'm trying to say. And so that's kind of a good or bad thing, depending on what you're trying to do. It works really, really nicely in shallow cutting so far, but again, that's to be expected with 16 thou. Even for a knife this thick, for the shallow cutting, it should do pretty well. It's obviously not a pure slicer, though. I need to find some stuff to go and pry with it to give that a shot. Considering the type of knife, I really doubt it would have any issues with prying. But so far, this just initial impression of this knife is quite nice. I really enjoy it. I might, at some point, give Matt an email and see if I could maybe get something, basically the same knife, but do a really nice lean flat grind to maybe 10 thou behind the edge, and get him to do a 10 DPS edge bevel and do a higher hardness than this. Do something like a 61, 62 to try this steel in a pure slicer. But yeah, as of today, from what I've seen of it, it's nice. Obviously, that's not a great deal of data to go off of, but only time will tell. Definitely what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the edge down on this to 10 DPS, and I'm probably going to play with edge finishes. I'm definitely going to do some cardboard cutting with it. Obviously, due to the thickness, I doubt it will be, you know, the greatest material ever, but I just want to, you know, got a wild hair up my ass, try to figure out how it does. I've actually never done cardboard cutting with a sort of low alloy carbon steel before, and so this knife is probably going to fix that. Oh, and the sheath, it's a nice simple Kydex sheath. I would call it light retention. It's sort of a beige color. Works perfectly fine. It's fit very well. Doesn't dull the knife on the way out or in. Yeah, exactly what I like sheaths. Simple and functional. I think it's set up for tech locks as well. So if I were to ever carry it, just dump one of those on there. And there we go. Next up is this Buck Selkirk survival knife. Supposedly named after the Selkirk Mountains up in Idaho. It's a 5-inch blade, 420 HC, full flat grind, about 30 thou behind the edge. These machined red and black micarta scales. A pommel. I wouldn't go so far to say it's a hammer pommel, but I mean, unless you actually hammer stuff with it, then I guess by default it's a hammer pommel. It's got this sort of like spiderweb pattern on it. I don't mind it, doesn't matter to me, but it's there. Nice big sharpening choil. You know, most people either love it or hate it. I actually prefer these for sharpening. It's got some jimping up top on the blade, and the jimping's actually pretty nice. It does a typical light force, will just index and let you know where your hand is. And heavy force actually helps keep your thumb in place. I think it's a little useless on this type of knife. I mean, especially, I mean, at least to me, for my preferences, for what this knife was used for, you know, cutting natural materials like woods and vines and things like that, I'd never use this type of grip. This, to me, unless you're cutting cardboard, this is really just a fighting grip to me. This is a Filipino fighting grip. I don't find much utility outside of slicing cardboard with that grip. Most of the time when I'm cutting, I'm using either hammer grip, reverse edge for a chest lever grip, or I'm doing a pinch grip. Those are basically the three grips that I use. I'm not positive if it's full tang because there's a weird, if you can see right there, there's like a weird transition between this bolster, I guess you'll call it, and the blade, but that totally goes away right here. So I need to take this apart and see how exactly it's constructed. I don't think there's a rat tail tang or any of that stuff in there, but because it feels rather heavy. It's got some weight back here. But it's a little weird that I'm not 100% positive exactly what the handle construction is like. But, yeah, I really picked this up for a couple of reasons. One, I just liked it. It looked cool. It was the first buck knife that I've seen in a while where I was like, wow, that's actually a nice knife I would want to use. I have a 119 just because, well, I mean, it's the iconic buck knife. I don't particularly like it. I don't like the handle. I don't like the guard. I think the general blade shape is nice, but I dislike the thick blade with the really deep hollow grind. But then again, that knife has processed a great deal of game, so my opinions may not be totally valid on that knife. But this one I got, again, like I said, just because I liked it, but also because I wanted a steel like 420 HC to compare against my Spyderco South Fork. And while this obviously isn't a perfect comparison, it's sort of similar. It's got a high stainless steel, but this is low carbide, which is what I wanted, compared to the high carbide of the S90V and the South Fork. Similar blade thickness to the South Fork, similar edge thickness to the South Fork, and while it doesn't have as much sweep, it's got a somewhat similar edge length to the South Fork. I think the South Fork has slightly more edge length. So, and I wanted to test, use both of these to, get the feel for a high carbide stainless and a low carbide stainless. Obviously, I have a lot of stuff to do before I do that. I want to really see how, because this is a made in China buck, so I really want to see how the Chinese factory did on this 420HC. There's no stamp of the Boss heat treat, although considering it's got the buck name on it, I don't know why they wouldn't do the Boss heat treat. This and all the cutting over here, that about half of that pile is from this. Same thing as the Waterstone knife. It ignored the wood. Still shaving, still slicing phone book paper, all that jazz. And I did some ramming cuts into knots. Did some chopping into a knot. Edge looks fine. It did come with a slight burr, but I stropped it off with some aggressive compound and then a slightly finer jeweler's rouge to just help kind of sort of polish that apex a little bit. But once again with this, I'm definitely going to take the edge down. The edge on this is about 20 degrees per side, and I'm going to put it at a 15 degrees per side, which is the same as what I have on my South Fork, to make it a better comparison for that. Handle is very comfortable though. It's a nice basic handle shape, good palm swell. It fits nicely for my hand. Obviously, handle ergonomics to some degree is rather subjective for everything, every handle. But I think this is a good general handle shape for most people. The knife comes with some sort of polymer, fiberglass reinforced, nylon type sheath. Typical, so it feels sort of similar to the stuff that Cold Steel does, except maybe just like slightly thicker. But basically in function, it works the same as Kydex. Simple friction sheath, knife drops right in. I doubt I'm going to have any issues with it, especially since it doesn't get cold here in Louisiana, so I don't have any issues like, say, Cliff Stamp might, where he gets, those ungodly temperatures of like 30 below zero and whatnot. It comes with a fire steel, which locks into place, and the fire steel also has a whistle on it. Again, nice feature. Between having it and not having it, sure, I'll take it. It's got a adjustable belt loop over here. Just a pretty nice sheath. Altogether, the knife was $50, so, I really just wanted the knife. Really not too disappointed with the sheath. It works. It does what it's supposed to, and it holds the knife until I need to use it. But, yeah. A couple of new knives so far from what I've done today. Both seem like they're going to be really solid knives. If you guys have any questions about them or any comments, please put them down below, y'all. Thanks again.